The morning had arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made everything look washed out and tired, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. At Rosie's Diner, on the corner of 5th and Main, the coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and the windows were fogged with the breath of early customers who lingered over their eggs and bacon, reluctant to face another Tuesday in November. Maya had been working the morning shift for 3 years now, long enough to know the rhythm of the place, the way conversations ebbed and flowed like tides, the particular squeak of booth number 7, and the fact that the register drawer stuck if you didn't pull it just right. She moved between tables with practiced ease, her ponytail swinging as she refilled coffee cups and delivered plates of hash browns that steamed in the cool air. It was nearly 10:30 when the old woman came in, moving slowly, carefully, as if each step required consideration. She wore a wool coat that had once been burgundy but had faded to the color of old roses, and her white hair was pinned back with silver clips that caught what little light filtered through the cloudy windows. She chose the booth by the far wall, away from the morning chatter, and sat with the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Maya brought her a menu and a glass of water, noting the way the woman's hands trembled slightly as she accepted them. "Good morning," Maya said with genuine warmth. "Take your time looking over the menu. Can I start you with some coffee?" "Please," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "Just black." Maya poured the coffee and left her to study the laminated pages. The woman took a long time deciding, her finger tracing down the prices with the careful attention of someone for whom every dollar mattered. Finally, she ordered oatmeal with toast, one of the least expensive items at $4.95. The breakfast arrived warm and simple, and the woman ate it slowly, making each bite count. Maya checked on her once, refilling her coffee, but otherwise left her in peace. There was something about the woman's quiet presence that suggested she preferred not to be fussed over. It was when the woman asked for her check that things began to unfold. Maya brought over the slip of paper, and the woman opened a small change purse that had seen better decades. The coins inside clinked softly as she began to count them out on the table, her shaking hands making the task more difficult than it should have been. Maya watched from behind the counter as the woman sorted quarters from dimes, dimes from nickels, creating small, careful piles. She counted once, then again, her lips moving silently. Then she stopped, staring down at the coins with an expression that Maya recognized, the quiet panic of not having enough. Without hesitation, Maya walked over and slid into the opposite side of the booth. "These tables are so uneven," she said conversationally, helping to steady a rolling quarter. "Mind if I help you count?" "Sometimes it's easier with 2 pairs of hands." The woman looked up, and Maya saw something flicker in her pale blue eyes, embarrassment mixed with relief. "I seem to be a little short," she admitted quietly. "I thought I had enough, but—" Maya quickly tallied the coins. $4.68. The bill was $5.47 with tax. Without making a show of it, Maya reached into her apron pocket and added a dollar bill to the pile. "Oh, this was stuck under your napkin," she said casually. "Must have fallen out of your purse." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You're very kind, but I don't think—" "Happens all the time," Maya said firmly, gathering up the exact change. "These old booths are like coin magnets. I'll be right back with your receipt." Maya paid the difference from her own tips, something she'd done before for other customers who came up short. It wasn't much, 87 cents, but she knew it meant everything to the woman sitting in booth 7. When she returned with the receipt, the woman was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." "Take care of yourself," Maya said gently, squeezing the woman's shoulder. The woman gathered her things slowly, carefully tucking the remaining coins back into her change purse. As she reached the door, she turned back one last time. "My daughter," she said softly. "She used to work in a place like this. She always said the kindest people were the ones who understood what it meant to count every penny." Her smile was sad but warm. "I think she would have liked you." And then she was gone, disappearing into the gray morning like a gentle ghost. The morning continued its familiar rhythm. Maya served coffee and pancakes, took orders for sandwiches, and wiped down tables. The lunch crowd began to filter in around 11:30. Construction workers from the site down the street, office workers on their lunch breaks, retirees who came for the early bird special, and stayed to solve the world's problems over coffee. It was just past noon when everything changed. Maya was carrying a tray of sandwiches to table 12 when she heard the commotion outside. Car doors slamming, urgent voices, the sound of someone running. Through the window, she could see a small crowd gathering on the sidewalk across the street, people pointing and talking animatedly. Then she saw the ambulance. The paramedics were loading someone onto a stretcher, and Maya's heart clenched when she recognized the burgundy coat, now rumpled and muddy from the wet pavement. It was her customer from the morning, the woman who had counted coins with shaking hands. Maya set down her tray and rushed outside, not even stopping to remove her apron. She pushed through the small crowd of onlookers until she could see clearly. The woman was conscious but pale, her silver hair disheveled, one of her clips missing. "What happened?" Maya asked a bystander. "Poor thing slipped on the wet sidewalk coming out of the pharmacy," an elderly man replied. "Went down hard. Someone said she might have broken her hip." Maya felt a surge of protective concern. She approached one of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes who was checking the patient's vital signs. "Excuse me," Maya said. "I know her. She was in my restaurant this morning. Is she going to be okay?" The paramedic looked up. "Are you family?" "No, she doesn't seem to have anyone with her. I just want to make sure she's all right." The woman on the stretcher turned her head toward Maya's voice, recognition flickering in her eyes. "The waitress," she whispered, "from the diner." "I'm here," Maya said gently, taking the woman's cold hand. "Everything's going to be fine." "Dorothy," the woman said weakly. "My name is Dorothy Chen. I'm Maya Rodriguez. I'm going to follow the ambulance to the hospital, okay? You won't be alone." Dorothy's grip tightened slightly on Maya's hand. "My purse," she said anxiously. "My medications are in there, and I need to. I'll bring your purse," Maya assured her. "Everything will be taken care of." The ride to St. Mary's Hospital took 12 minutes, Maya following in her old Honda behind the ambulance with Dorothy's purse on the passenger seat. She'd told her manager she had a family emergency, which felt true enough in the moment, though she couldn't quite explain why. At the hospital, Maya waited in the emergency room while Dorothy was examined and x-rayed. The fluorescent lights were harsh and unforgiving, and the chairs were uncomfortable plastic things that seemed designed to discourage lingering. But Maya stayed, thumbing through old magazines and watching the controlled chaos of the ER. It was nearly 2 hours later when a doctor emerged, still wearing surgical scrubs. "Are you here for Dorothy Chen?" he asked. Maya stood up quickly. "Yes, how is she?" She has a fractured hip and some bruising, but she's stable. We'll need to keep her for surgery and recovery. Are you family? No, I'm a friend. She didn't seem to have anyone else. The doctor nodded sympathetically. That's unfortunately common. Many of our elderly patients don't have local family. She's asking for you if you'd like to see her. Maya found Dorothy in a hospital bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. Her face brightened when she saw Maya enter the room. You stayed, Dorothy said, her voice hoarse but grateful. Of course I stayed. Maya pulled a chair close to the bed. The doctor says you'll need surgery, but you're going to be fine. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how I'm going to manage this. The hospital bills, the recovery time. I live alone, and my Social Security barely covers my rent as it is. She looked down at her hands, lying pale against the blanket. This morning I was worried about paying for breakfast. Now. Maya felt her heart break a little. She thought about the woman carefully counting coins, the dignity with which she'd accepted help, the mention of a daughter who used to work in diners. There was a story here, layers of loss and struggle that Maya was only beginning to understand. Tell me about your daughter, Maya said gently. Dorothy's expression softened. Linda, she passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. Her voice caught slightly. She was a nurse, actually. Worked her way through school waiting tables, just like you. She always said that people who work service jobs understand life in ways that others don't. What about other family? Linda was all I had. My husband died 20 years ago, and we only had the one child. Dorothy closed her eyes for a moment. I've been managing on my own, but just barely. This morning, I was at the pharmacy picking up my heart medication. I'd put off refilling it for 2 weeks because I couldn't afford both the prescription and groceries. She opened her eyes and looked at Maya. Your kindness at breakfast meant I could get my medication. If I'd had another episode. Maya felt the weight of small moments, how they rippled out in ways no one could predict. The 87 cents she'd added to Dorothy's coins had literally been a life-saving gesture. The surgery, Maya said. What will it cost? Dorothy laughed, but it was a sound without humor. More than I have. The social worker is going to help me apply for assistance programs, but even with insurance, it'll be thousands. And I can't work for months, assuming anyone would hire a 78-year-old woman when I'm recovered. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the hospital around them, distant conversations, beeping monitors, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Maya thought about her own life, her small apartment, and her savings account that never seemed to grow much. She thought about kindness and coincidence and the strange ways that people's paths crossed. It was nearly 6 o'clock when Maya finally left the hospital, promising to return the next day. Dorothy was scheduled for surgery in the morning, and Maya had volunteered to be her emergency contact since she had no one else. The November evening was crisp and clear, the earlier drizzle having given way to a sky full of stars. Maya drove home slowly, thinking about the day's events, about how quickly things could change, how fragile the balance was for so many people living on the margins. Her apartment was small but warm, a studio with a Murphy bed and a kitchenette that barely qualified as a kitchen. Maya heated up leftover soup and sat by her window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about Dorothy lying in a hospital bed, facing surgery and an uncertain future with the quiet courage of someone who had learned to endure whatever life brought. The next morning, Maya arrived at the hospital early, before her shift at the diner. Dorothy was already prepped for surgery, groggy from pre-medication, but alert enough to recognize Maya's voice. "You came back," she murmured. "I told you I would." Maya squeezed her hand gently. "The surgery will go fine. I'll be here when you wake up." Maya spent the morning in the surgical waiting room, drinking terrible coffee and reading the same magazine 3 times. When the surgeon finally emerged, looking tired but satisfied, Maya felt a rush of relief. "The surgery went very well," he reported. "She should make a full recovery, though it'll take time. She's lucky to have someone who cares enough to be here." Maya visited Dorothy every day during her recovery, bringing flowers from the diner's supplier and books from the library's free bin. They talked about Dorothy's life, her late husband who had been a teacher, her daughter who had dreamed of opening her own clinic, the small house Dorothy had been forced to sell after Linda's medical bills mounted up. It was on Dorothy's 5th day in the hospital that the limousine appeared. Maya was helping Dorothy with her lunch when a nurse knocked on the door. "Mrs. Chen, there's someone here to see you." A gentleman in a very expensive suit. Dorothy looked confused. "I don't know anyone who would visit me here." The man who entered was distinguished, silver-haired, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to boardrooms and important decisions, but his eyes were kind. "Mrs. Chen," he said warmly, "I'm James Morrison. I believe you knew my mother." Dorothy stared at him, confusion deepening. "I'm sorry, I don't." "Margaret Morrison," he continued gently. "She passed away 6 months ago. In her will, she left instructions for me to find you." Dorothy's hand flew to her mouth. Maggie Morrison was your mother?" James smiled. "She talked about you constantly. How you two worked together at the textile factory 40 years ago. How you stayed friends all through the years. She said you were the kindest person she'd ever known, that you helped her through some of the darkest times in her life." Maya watched this exchange with growing amazement. Dorothy's eyes were bright with tears and recognition. "Maggie," Dorothy whispered, "we lost touch when I moved across town to take care of my mother. I tried to find her, but—" "She never forgot you," James said gently. "She left you something in her will. I've been trying to track you down for months. When I heard about your accident on the hospital's charity case list," he trailed off, then smiled. "She would have wanted to help with your medical bills, you know. She always said you gave without expecting anything in return." James reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. "She left you her house," he said simply. "The little blue one on Elm Street that she always said reminded her of the home she grew up in. It's yours, free and clear. She also set aside money for maintenance and property taxes for the next 10 years. Dorothy began to cry, deep sobs that seemed to come from years of holding everything together alone. Maya moved to comfort her, but Dorothy was crying from joy, from relief, from the overwhelming realization that she wasn't as alone as she'd believed. "There's more," James continued. "She established a small trust fund. Nothing extravagant, but enough to ensure you never have to count coins for breakfast again." Maya felt her own eyes fill with tears as she watched Dorothy's face transform. The weight of constant worry seemed to lift from her features, replaced by something that looked like peace. "And," James added, looking at Maya, "Mother left specific instructions about thanking anyone who showed you kindness during your time of need. She believed that kindness creates ripples, and those ripples should be honored." He handed Maya an envelope as well. Inside was a check for $5,000, and a note written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for taking care of my dear friend when she needed it most. Use this to take care of yourself. Margaret Morrison." Maya stared at the check, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. She didn't even know me." "She knew Dorothy," James said simply, "and Dorothy talks about you constantly." The waitress who helped her count coins, who stayed with her in the hospital, who showed up every day just because it was the right thing to do. Mother always said that when you take care of someone's loved ones, you're part of their family. The recovery period that followed was different than anyone had expected. Dorothy moved into the blue house on Elm Street, a charming 2-bedroom with a garden that needed tending and windows that let in the morning light. Maya helped her settle in, using vacation days from the diner to make sure Dorothy had everything she needed. The $5,000 allowed Maya to enroll in night classes at the community college, something she'd dreamed of but never thought possible. Dorothy insisted on paying her a small salary to help with household tasks and grocery shopping, claiming she needed the company more than the help. What developed between them was an unexpected friendship, the kind that forms when two people recognize something essential in each other. Dorothy shared stories of her life, her marriage, her daughter's dreams and ambitions. Maya talked about her own hopes, her plans to study business, and maybe open her own restaurant someday. They established routines, Sunday dinners where Maya cooked and Dorothy told stories. Tuesday visits to the farmer's market where Dorothy knew every vendor by name. Evening walks through the neighborhood when Dorothy's hip had healed enough to handle the gentle exercise. The blue house began to feel lived in again. Dorothy planted flowers in the front yard, colors chosen to bloom in succession, so there would always be something bright to look at. Maya helped paint the kitchen a cheerful yellow and hung curtains in the living room. 6 months later, Maya graduated from her business program with a certificate in restaurant management. Dorothy was there in the audience, beaming with pride as Maya walked across the stage. After the ceremony, they went to Rosie's diner for a celebratory meal, sitting in the same booth where they'd first met. "You know," Dorothy said, cutting into her pie, "Maggie always said that some meetings are meant to happen, that the universe has a way of putting people in each other's paths exactly when they need to be there." Maya looked around the familiar diner, at the booth where Dorothy had counted coins with shaking hands, at the counter where she'd made the decision to help without expecting anything in return. It seemed impossible that such a small gesture, 87 cents and a moment of kindness, could have led to all of this. "I still can't believe how everything worked out," Maya said. Dorothy smiled, the same expression she'd worn that morning when she'd thanked Maya for seeing her as a person who mattered. "Some things are meant to be," she said simply. "Kindness finds kindness, and sometimes when you think you're helping someone else, you're actually helping yourself in ways you never imagined." Outside the diner window, the late spring evening was warm and full of possibility. Inside, two friends shared dessert and made plans for tomorrow, both of them understanding that some stories don't end, they just keep growing, one small act of grace building upon another, creating something beautiful and lasting from the simplest of beginnings. Because sometimes counting coins leads to counting blessings, and sometimes the people who seem to need help the most are actually angels in disguise, waiting to show us that kindness is never lost, only transformed into something even more meaningful than we could have imagined.